watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 185, Getting Started with XPages and Bluemix, Part 2. Bluemix has more flavors than Baskin-Robbins. Okay, before we get into the show, just a quick NotesIn9 update. I've been working on my migration to YouTube, and I believe every show, just about, there's one or two that I've held out, but every show should be on YouTube now. So if you go to youtube.com/Dave Leedy, that's Dave, not David, you should be able to see all the NotesIn9 shows that matter right now. There is a subscription button, so click that if you want. If you don't, I don't care. But they're still going to be there for you. So hopefully that helps both me and both you by moving over to YouTube. All the blog posts, I believe I've gone through, and let me tell you what a pain in the ass that was. But I believe that I've gone through all the blog posts and pointed the videos to the new YouTube site. If you find any that I missed somehow, please let me know and I will fix it. A super huge thanks to a great guy, Tim Briley, who volunteered to help me with some of my grunt work to try to make this a little easier. And quite honestly, I probably couldn't have gotten this done in this kind of speed without him. So thanks a lot, Tim. I do appreciate your help. Live speaking next month in November, I'll be speaking live at the TLCC and the Team Studio webinar series. I'll be part of a group of other people, and it's on November 17th at 10:30 a.m. I think I only have like 10 minutes to talk, give or take, so that'll work out pretty well for me. I like the short ones. So tune into that if you like it. I'll hopefully have more details on what I'm going to talk about in the future. And I did make 2 recent blog posts. I'm going to try to non-video blog just a little more if I can. More about tips, hopefully more about just little tips that I don't have time to make videos for, but we'll see how it goes. I did make this post. I don't usually make too many opinionated posts because I figure you don't care about my opinion, because sometimes I don't. But I do believe in this, and I did make this post. If you still believe in IBM's backward compatibility, you're nuts. And I believe that I'm surprised there weren't kind of more comments on that. But the fact of the matter is, and this is not IBM's fault at all. In the web world, there's too many moving parts that cannot be controlled. You know, you've got mobile, you've got desktop, you've got different operating systems, you've got different browsers or so. So you cannot rely on the thinking of the Notes client where, oh, it's just always going to work and it'll always be backward compatible. That is dead. So how do you defend against that? Upgrade to the latest versions. Stay current. Test and test some more, and just kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on around you. That's the only way to defend against it. If not, you're asking for trouble. And one place where I got in trouble recently was in my iPad app that I've been working on for the last however too long. On one of the views, these numbers for my items, identification numbers, were showing up in a different color. It was hard to read because I was using a black background. And it turned out that iOS turned them into links because it thought they were phone numbers. So good if it's a phone number, but annoying if it's not. You can't call on the iPhone anyway, so I'm not quite sure why I would even do that. But anyway, there's a little theme. There's a little code or XML you can add to your theme to turn off phone number detection in iOS. So if you're doing a lot with iOS and want to turn that off, go to that blog and check it out. Okay, today this is the same slide I had on last show. It's another Bluemix show today. We're at part 2. Marky Roden did a previous Bluemix show I recommend you checking out. That DeveloperWorks Premium I talked about last show is available, and that does seem like a very interesting deal. I do want to highlight the XPages runtime and dominant service. While it is still experimental, it is available in the Europe and US clouds, so I believe it's available wherever on Bluemix. The other thing I wanted to point out here, you may not have seen this, but on DeveloperWorks, they have this thing, developer.ibm.com.answers. And what that is it's basically a clone of Stack Overflow, like an internal IBM clone of Stack Overflow. But there's a lot, I love Stack Overflow. Though Stack Overflow is not the end all be all, there are some problems with it. So this is kind of like IBM's version of it. So seems to be a lot of Bluemix questions coming in there, and the development team is answering those questions. So that's kind of cool to kind of like have that access and stuff like that. So if you do have Bluemix problems or questions, this might be the place to go first before you go to Stack Overflow as a whole. So if you're not aware of that, check it out. It is actually a very, very pretty looking site. God, I wish the forums looked like that. But that is probably going to be the topic of another show coming up. Fair warning to IBM. Okay, anyway, Oliver Busse comes back on. I need to listen to the videos and make sure I learn how to pronounce that. But he's a great guy. He's an IBM champion. He's an XPages expert. He does a lot with technology and music, and now he's doing a lot with Bluemix, and he's come on to continue his series on getting started with Bluemix. So with that being said, let's go to the demo.
Hi again, Oliver Busse here. This video is the second part of the how to get started with XPages application development on IBM Bluemix. This video is actually the missing link and the missing information that my first video did not cover. There are some questions open, and this video tries to answer those questions. The two questions are: what about the separation of design and data? Will I do this? What is the best practice for it? And the second question is, what if my application uses external plugins, extensions, OSGI components, such as the OpenNTF Domino API or the Bootstrap for XPages or the ViewGrid or you name it? The first question is, how do I deal with the separation of design and data? From the Bluemix dashboard, you easily get to the documentation area here, and you just search for XPages, and the result gives you several entries here, and you start with the document which is called Getting Started with XPages NoSQL Database. This documentation contains sample code that shows you to use a new class and a new object, a new bean. Actually, it's a new bean available on server-side JavaScript, but it's also available in pure Java, of course, when you want to write your own bean for it. Therefore, I show you my way I did it. But I start with the way IBM recommends you to start with. When you scroll down this document, there's a lot of information about the service itself, which information you can grab from it, with environment variables, that there are methods available from the so-called Bluemix context object. This is a server-side JavaScript bean that is new and available if you are running on an extension library version 13 or later. We have 14 released since last week, I think. Yeah, it was last week, and this object is available now. And if you scroll further down, you will find those boxes that display some example code for computing the database property of your data source. I'll show you that. If you are creating an XPage, you normally define a data source. In this case, you define a Domino document and define which form is used, blah, blah, blah. But the key part is here, if you have to separate the data from the design, which you have when you are running on Bluemix, then you have to compute the application property here, which is nothing else than the database property. You are used to use the current option here, and this points to the database you are working in. In this case, you have to compute the data source here with some server-side JavaScript code. And the documentation here in this on this page shows you how to do it. They don't use the Domino document data source, but they use the Domino view data source. They assume that you are starting with an X page that contains a view panel. So, okay, we can do this. I place a view here, and this is the same. And here you have to switch to another database, not the current one, and compute the data source, the database for the data source. So this is the correct name. Okay, if I copy this, you can also click on that button, and I can paste this in the compute value. And you can see the following code. No, this is bullshit. Sorry. The whole code is the source of everything that you can place directly in your XPage source code. So the basic idea is you have to modify every XPage that contains a data source, even it's a document data source, or for every view panel that is defined in the next page, you have to modify the data source component. And therefore they showed you the code here in that way, because that's an XSP source code. So this is everything that is needed, and it's basically saying, I try to reformat it for better readability. So it's basically saying, okay, I check if this application runs on Bluemix. This is done by calling the Bluemix context object. This is already available with the latest extension library. Please make sure that you also have installed the extension library on your local Domino server. This is what I said in the last video. It's up to you if you want to separate the design from the data also on your local environment. I strongly recommend you to do that, because then it's easier to create generic formulas like this one. So in this case, this means if this application, this design part of the application is running on Bluemix, then the path to the database, the file path, including the NSF name, will be computed by the Bluemix context, and there by the so-called data service. You can see this is a chained method call. It calls the data service by the getDataService method, and from the data service object, you can see there's a method called findDatabaseName. The database name comes straight from the setting of your IBM NoSQL data service I showed you in the video before. I open it here, I click on the launch button, which is, by the way, green and not blue, as I said in the first video, but yeah, this is just cosmetics. So this page will open up, and the database you are using is this one. This is the value that is returned by the findDatabaseName. So you can see a problem maybe here. The database name is hard-coded. The database name is underneath your path, your own path, which is individual for your user ID, but the NSF name is returned hard-coded, which is always named tododata.nsf. Yeah, what if your database is not named tododata.nsf? This is the starting point when you use the boilerplate, the demo application. It works great, but it won't work if you have your own data source defined, as I showed you before. When I go to my Domino environment on Bluemix, I open my folder and my space, and there are 4 databases, and just one, this was the first attempt, is called tododata.nsf. This is the path that corresponds with the setting here: Bluemix, Busse, gmail.com, dev, blah, 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 blah. This is the only database from that 4 that is compliant to the return value that you get from this method call. So you have to replace the database name. So the bottom line is that this sample code is nice, but it won't work if you created the data NSF container under another name than tododata.nsf. Yeah. You will find it out soon, but you don't have to. Therefore, I tell you. On the other way, if you're not running on the Bluemix context, that means you're running locally or on your on-prem server, then the database name is hard-coded. So the sample code just says, okay, this is my app data.nsf, and it's of course a file name that points to the root of your Domino server. So there's also a hard-coded place. Of course, you can replace it by formula database get file path, which means, okay, look up in this database. If you want to use the design application part to store your playground data while developing, then you can use, of course, the local one. No problem. But this is the tricky part. Okay, I'll leave that alone. It was just to get you the idea what I'm talking about. So the main part is here to bring up some generic coding and some dynamic in the computation of the data source that should be used. Okay, I made a blog post about it. If you read it, then you know what I mean. My first approach was to examine the new Bluemix related parts of the extension library. You can find the extension library on GitHub, and you browse to that path inside the repository to find the Bluemix util stuff. And there under the source folder, you can find the context folder, and inside the context folder there is the so-called Bluemix context and the so-called data service. And the data service Java class contains the find, what was it called? Find database name, here is it. And it just returns some environmental variables that seem to come with the Bluemix platform. This is what the documentation says at the top. There are some, there are some methods to get environmental informations to access those environment variables. And when you open this page, where is it? Here is it. Nothing else is displayed here. This is just environment stuff. The name, the host, the IP, the domino name, blah, 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 blah. This is environment stuff. So everything that is gathered via this data service context is nothing but strings, simple strings. So very basic. And therefore, the host, the domino name and the file path is returned. Did I close this? Yes, okay. You should have a look at it for yourself. Okay. Okay, to be more generic and to maybe reuse some code snippets in every application, and to be more flexible regarding the also the local environment when using the separation of design and data, even on your on-prem machine, I created a bean. I linked the bean code, the source code, directly from my blog post, but I show you the bean, what the bean does. It's very basic. Okay, I created some methods. I'm using, of course, the Bluemix context. Where is it? Here is it. The Bluemix stuff from the extension library. I also, in this application especially, I also use some external stuff from. No, I don't use the Domino API here, but I can show you an example of an application that uses the API. This one does not use the Domino API, but okay, this doesn't matter. But it uses the Bluemix utilities, the context manager, and the data service. So, as you can see, I defined a variable that is called static NSF name, and it's set to the name to do data NSF. This is the name the Bluemix environment will return when you call the find database method. So if they ever change that name, you have to change that name here too. Maybe if they remove that part of the file name information from here by just giving us the path and letting us define the file name. Okay, you don't have to do anything. Because what my bean does is, of course, use the lookup function, the method that finds the database name that is used on Bluemix, and just replaces this static part with a value that you can define in your application, assuming that your XSP part is only using one data part. Okay, if you're using two different data parts from one design part, then you have to tweak it a bit. Okay, but that should be no problem. Okay, there are some methods here to return the local data source file path, the Bluemix database file name, and it's nothing special. There are methods to get the whole database as an object, because sometimes it's better not to compute the database source path as a string as you need it as in the view panel data source, or in the document data source properties. This is assuming a string, but sometimes you want to access the database object itself in your own server-side script code or even in your own Java code. I also created a method to get the view entry collection. This comes in handy when you are dealing with repeat controls. I will show you that later, how this method is used. So the main method is a get database method, which is called in the constructor of my bean. By the way, the bean is in this case view scoped. I think I looked it up. Yes, it's view scoped. It's called DAO. This is the configuration in the faces config. It's view scope. You can also set it session scoped or application scoped. If you are not planning to switch between the data sources from page to page call, then you can set another scope, of course. And it's not that heavy what is stored inside that bean. It's just a few strings here, nothing more. So I don't care about memory management regarding view scope beans when it only has some strings as fields. So, of course, you access at every page load, you access the Bluemix context and you look up the database, blah, blah, blah. And you also look up a local file resource, a file resource that is also in the NSF, in the XSP part of the NSF. There is a method that says get data source properties. As I mentioned, I'm checking if I'm running on Bluemix, and then nothing else has to be done. The computation of the database is okay, except from the part that I want to replace the static name by a name of my own choice. So if my data source is named, for example, greets.nsf or greetsdata.nsf, this is the corresponding sample, as it is named on your local environment, for example, in this case, it is named greetsdata.nsf, then I cannot deal with its static name, so I have to replace it. And therefore, I created a so-called properties file in the files section. It's called data source properties. I open this, and there are two entries. This properties file lets you define the local file paths to your data container when you're developing on local. That should be used with the design part. This is the first one. The variable is called db file path. And the second one is the Bluemix data source name without the path part, just the NSF name, because you don't you cannot influence the file path because you are only allowed to store NSF databases with a Notes client that I showed you in the video before. Under that specific file path, Bluemix, your name, your user ID /dev or /another space, the so-called space. So the most interesting part is the NSF file name and not the file path. So therefore, this variable only gets the file name. So what my bean does is just getting or calling the method for finding the Bluemix database file name. Where's the method? Get to Bluemix database file name. Boom, 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 boom. This is a file name. Wait a second, and just call a method, not the method search blah 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 or find, or what's it called? Find database name. What was the method called on server side? Find database name. No, there's another method that is even better, as it returns a vector. This is called addDBName. You know that function. It's exactly returning what an addDBName formula in server-side script will return. It's a vector containing the server name in the first element, and in the second element the file path, including the file name, so the NSF name. So what I have to do is just replace the default file path, which I get from the second element, replace it with my own Bluemix file name that I get from the properties file. The static NSF name is the name up here. So nothing more. And this method is also checking if there is a properties file available. If not, of course, it will use the tododata.nsf file name. Yeah, this is just a first start. So if you ever experience problems with my bean, then just remember that you have to create a properties file name with valid variables and valid names here and values for the bean to work correctly. So this bean works locally and on Bluemix. All you have to do is use the computation in your XPage, and I show you that on the index page. This page contains two data sources: the document data source, where these two fields correspond to, and a data source that this repeat control uses. So starting with the data source defined on the page level, it's a document. And there you can see, okay, I'm using a form called greeting, the data source name, blah, blah, blah. This is all what you should know. But the computation of the database path, what's this? Is done via the bean. Remember, the phases config defines my bean as an object called DAO. And for the bean's sake, I can access the DB path by this way. Because I have a field. Wow, what's this? Because I have a field DB path, and I also have a corresponding method that sets get DB path, so you can easily access the value via the short-term DB path, as easy as pie. The second one, the repeat control, uses something else. This is a method also contained in the bean, and where you have to where you have to pass the name of a view because it returns view entries. When you are using a repeat control that should access view data, view entries and documents, of course, in the later step within the repeat container, you have to grab the view entries. It's almost the get all entries method that you call from a view. My method does both for you. It set get view entries. String is the view name, and I access the database, which I also compute from all the settings I already talked about. It grabs the view, hopefully it finds it. If not, then we return nothing or null, then you don't see any data. And in case we find the view in the data container, it returns all entries. That's all. Very simple. But it's very handy to use when creating the XPages. So with that bean, it should be not that hard to modify all of your XPages regarding the data sources, accesses for every view panel, for every page, for every nested panel that uses another data source, and so on and so on. And remember, you can always compute the database property of those data sources. For example, if I switch back to my XPage, I can show you that in the properties itself, the data definition, the data source, there's always a property called database name. There are some caveats, though. There are elements that don't provide a database name property for defining a file path and a file name. For example, an object from the extension library. I just put it at the bottom here because it's not interesting. Extension library, the tech cloud element, for example. There are other elements that also do not provide a database element, but I show you that on the tech cloud. The tech cloud wants a data source for the cloud data. You can add a cloud data, but just one domino view cloud data. It must be a view. And you define the view name, but what you cannot define is the database name. So you cannot access a view that's outside of your current database to create that tech cloud. I already created an issue for this, and it's been heard, and it will be fixed in future releases of the extension library. Great, guys, I hope. You find the other issues too, because I have no idea where this issue is also applicable, maybe name picker or something. I don't know. Just look up for yourself. If you find other issues, then remember I just created one in the extension library. It's filed under number 29. So it would be helpful for the developers to add the new findings directly here. Then they don't have to look up all issues that deal with the same with the same property, with the same problem. Excuse me. Okay. That being said, I hope you got the idea. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Look up my my blog post, and in the next part, I will explain how to use extensions. Thank you and bye-bye.
And that's the demo. I really appreciate Oliver making this contribution. I believe I have one more show in the series. And until then, here's my contact information, and I thank you for your time.